Hey everyone, welcome to our next session. We are focusing on empowering your narrative, leveraging self-value and negotiation tactics. My name is Joel. I'm a part of the Arize team here, and I'd love to welcome Lacey. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Joel. So I'm Lacey Cope. I'm a senior manager for global leadership development at Slalom, a consulting company. Prior to that, I worked at a company called Insight Data Science, where I was the head of coaching and development, and I coached over 1,000 job seekers transitioning into the tech industry to do that effectively. Some of the things that get me really jazzed and really excited is helping folks understand and really articulate their value proposition, knowing themselves, having that self awareness and confidence to really effectively secure that next great gig for themselves. And also in asking for what they're worth and asking for what they need. So, negotiating strategies also gets me really excited. Nowadays, I spend my time training people leaders and managers how to communicate effectively. And I find having experienced and worked with both sides of that population, job seekers, folks trying to get their way in the door, and experienced leaders, has given me a really well-rounded outlook on what it takes to be effective in a job search.
Hmm, excellent. Well, we're excited to have you here and excited to kind of dive into some of these soft skills that can, I think, benefit a lot of folks watching today. So great. Let's begin chatting a little bit about understanding what goes into knowing what your professional value is. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Joel. So I really think it's so important as a job seeker or anybody, any career professional, anybody showing up at a job day in, day out to really understand what their professional value proposition is. It's one of those things that so often I think when we're, especially in a job seeking position or we're looking for that next role, that next position, maybe even within a company looking for that next promotion, we want to understand what are they looking for? What's the cookie cutter that they're expecting me to show up with? What is the list of requirements on this job description or the list of requirements in this next role, this next level, which is helpful to know what is being sought after on the company's side, but it's disempowering to think that that's the only part of the equation that matters because I'll let you in on like a bit of a spoiler. That is a company's or a hiring manager's best attempt, best effort to figure out I've got this pain point, I've got this problem that needs to be solved for. Here's the profile of somebody I think can solve that problem. But they're limited by their own vantage point, their own perspective. It could look so different. And so to truly be empowered as a job seeker or as a career professional, you really want to know for yourself, what is it that I bring to the table? What is it that's unique about my expertise, my transferable skills, how I might troubleshoot or problem solve something, because I might actually unlock something that they haven't considered before. But what does that take? That takes really knowing yourself and having that self awareness and self confidence to not only identify what your professional value is, but know how to articulate it to whoever it is, the stakeholder that you're trying to secure something from. So whether that be a job, a promotion, or just getting staff to a project. And so, you need to do that self work up front to really identify. I'll say with a caveat here, given my background in helping people transition into tech, so they might have had a profile or a background that didn't look traditional. One of the things that I often hear is, but I don't even know what I bring to the table. I don't see where my add is. And so really getting creative and thinking about what were those successes, those wins, those things that I felt really accomplished in doing. It might help to even check in with folks that adore you, whether it's your mom or a mentor, a best friend, somebody that always sees what is great and fantastic about you, to have that reflected back to you to help you in really identifying those things. And then from that point, so once you're already kind of bolstered in your confidence, then looking through and seeing, okay, here's what I know I bring to the table. One of my go-to kind of catchphrases in coaching is we're not looking to get you a job or to secure you that next role in spite of your background, but because of it. And so one of the things that really is important here is to make sure that you're not expecting that hiring manager, that company, that leader to do the work to make sense of your story for you. You want to have already done some of that work to identify, I know why you want to hire me because of my background, because of the fact that I took a gap year, because of the fact that this is my first role in an AI focused company, whatever it might be. You want to know how to answer that question. Why are you valuable to us?
That's great. And once you're kind of able to establish that, how do you find the right role, not just any role, especially like as maybe as you transition into a tech industry?
Yeah, I love talking about that, Joel. I often use the analogy of like when you're dating, you don't want to go on a date with somebody and find out that they're ready for a spouse, they're ready for a partner, they're just looking to slot somebody into that role. You want to know that somebody likes you, appreciates you, sees your greatness for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the same with a job. I think a lot of times when we're approaching the job search because we're stressed, because we're anxious, because we either want to get out of what feels like not a great situation, or we're currently unemployed and we're looking for that next thing. We just want something to feel that security financially and otherwise. But if you approach it as looking for any job and not the right job, you're actually doing yourself a disservice and you're making it harder for yourself in the short and the long term. Because one of the first questions once you do get an interview is going to be, why do you see yourself at this company? Or why is this a great role for you at this time in your career? And you want to be able to articulate that. So you want to know that you're doing a targeted job search, meaning you've actually done, again, that self-examination work to figure out what's the right fit for me from a values proposition, from a skills proposition. And going back to what I mentioned before around the problems that need solved by a company, that's what motivates a company to put money into a role. Is we've got problems and pain points that need solving for. So to know these are the types of problems and pain points I want to be solving for is going to help guide you to find that right job and not any job, which is also, I'll kind of foreshadow a little bit when we get to the negotiation strategy, going to come in super importantly when it comes to negotiations as well.
That's great. Um, can you talk a little bit about self-elimination, this idea of self-eliminating in that job hunt?
Absolutely. I see it all the time, Joel, and it really like hurts my heart even to see people that count themselves out before somebody else has counted them out of the process, right?
Mm,
So this comes into play even up front when somebody is, again, evaluating job descriptions, they're doing that hunt, they're searching, and they see, I don't meet 100% of these requirements, and so I'm going to opt out. I'm not even going to apply. I'm not going to give the recruiter a chance or an opportunity to consider if I could be the right fit for this job. It's also significant when we think of from a diversity perspective and the gender gap, especially in tech. Studies have shown that women, unless they meet close to 100% of stated expectations on a job description, won't even apply, whereas men are more likely to apply if they meet 50% of the stated expectations. And obviously, there's a lot that we could go into around like the spectrum of that. But if we were just to take it in a very simplified perspective. And so that's why it's upsetting to think about that self-elimination process, is we don't actually know if somebody's going to think you're not the right profile if you don't even give them a chance to have a conversation with you. And actually, that's something that I'll say too, from a resume or an application perspective, thinking of it as a targeted marketing tool to invite a conversation. A lot of times we put a lot of weight and pressure on like, this resume is the thing that's going to get me the job, but it's not. It's just seeking to open that door to initiate a conversation with the company, to do that evaluation process of, is this the right fit? And so if I'm not even giving you the chance to have that conversation with me, I've eliminated an opportunity that could have been great for both of us.
yeah,
And actually, sorry, Joel, I just thought of one other
that's
thing
okay.
to flag there, is just the imposter syndrome that can come into play here as well, especially going back to that idea that if you have a non-traditional background, whether that's you took some time off to raise a family and now you're getting back into the job market, you come from academia and you have a PhD and you're looking to get that first tech job, you've been a software engineer and now you want to go into machine learning, whatever that transition looks like, a lot of times it can trigger imposter syndrome or this feeling of, I don't actually know what I think I should know to be in this position or be in this role. Imposter syndrome is a really interesting phenomenon too, because it can get re-triggered at a variety of stages of your career. So even if you feel like I'm not early stage in my career, I've dealt with that, but now I'm in a leadership position for the first time and it's coming back up. It's important to have tools in your toolkit to combat that. And a lot of that comes back to that sense of owning your story, to having the self-awareness and self-confidence to know, here's why this unique part of my background, this experience I've had is going to be of value to solving these problems and these pain points.
Yeah, that's great. I love hearing stories like that. I know some folks at Arize, I've heard some less traditional career paths, but all of those things that they've learned and built through their career kind of make them who they are and make them more valuable to us, even if it's not your just traditional, from school or education straight into the job market. So
So often I find, Joel, I love that you share that example that when you talk to people that you admire that are doing really cool things and you ask them, how did you end up in this role? How did you end up doing what you're doing? It is so rare to hear somebody say, this is exactly the path I set out on, right?
yeah,
Even if somebody actually, I think you're going to be sharing my LinkedIn profile. If somebody wanted to go look at my LinkedIn profile, you might think, wow, it took this lady a long time to figure out what she wanted to do, because it does look very twisty and turny, right? There's some social media marketing in there. There's some nonprofit experience. There's some fundraising for the College of William and Mary that I did for a while. There's life coaching. It looks like this hodgepodge of experiences, but I've done the work to really own that story and see what the through line is through all of that. So even
sure.
though the environment changed, the role changed, what was consistent is I am really passionate about communications, public speaking, facilitation, connecting people with what they need to grow. And so whether that was fundraising to align somebody to the right donor opportunity, or nonprofit work helping high school exchange students come to the States for a 9-month experience, there is a common thread that I have made sense of, so I can then communicate and articulate that.
Okay, great. I'd love to transition to this idea that's so fascinating to me about interviewing the interviewer. Can you tell us some more about that?
Yes, Joel, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, to be honest, because I think that there is such a misperception that makes sense. It comes from a place of fear that as a job seeker that I don't get to also interview the person I'm talking to, right? We treat it as an exam that's pass fail. You either get the job or you don't. And we're putting all of the responsibility, all of the power, all of the decision making ability in the hands of that interviewer, when in reality, all of us, right, whoever is involved in that decision making process is looking for that sweet spot, that mutual fit of, this is the right next step for me in my career, and there's this need on the company side, and there's alignment here. And the only way we're going to achieve that or get to that is if we start to treat interviews more as a conversation instead of an interrogation.
Mm,
And that concept for a lot of people feels really novel. And again, I understand from both sides, actually. From the side of a job seeker, I really want this thing that you have. I want the security. I want the visibility. I want the agency. I want the title. I want whatever that I think that this job is going to provide to me. And actually, and this might be surprising for job seekers, from the person sitting in the interviewing seat, the interviewer, it can also feel kind of daunting and overwhelming if you haven't been trained in how to interview effectively, if you haven't done it a lot. This is not what you spend most of your time doing, most likely, right? You have a whole different function, and then you're wearing the hiring manager hat briefly, and you're engaging in these conversations, and you might feel like, I just want the recruiter to give me a printed list of questions and I'm supposed to go through it so I don't say anything wrong, I don't ask anything inappropriate, I don't cross the line in any way, shape, or form. And so trying to encourage folks on both sides of the power dynamic and equation to start to see it more as that conversation and not interrogation. I will say, there's always going to be exceptions to this as well. And I have heard of those interviewers that are motivated of wanting to see how somebody does under pressure. So there is this sense of I'm going to be very stoic and very serious, but you're not going to get the best out of your interviewee from that approach. Because the way I like to think about interviews is it's a simulation of what it would be like for us to work together. That's the goal here, right? To see if there's that mutual fit. So if we're simulating what it's like to work day in, day out, if you're not always going to be stoic and an interrogator of me, then don't approach the interview in that way either.
Lacey, can you tell me a little bit about what a job seeker could do to transition from that feeling of a job interview, going from an interrogation to more of that conversational tone?
Absolutely. So there's so much that a job seeker can do to feel empowered in approaching preparation for an interview. I will circle back to what we just chatted about around owning their story. So the more confident they feel coming in, that they understand why is this company hiring for this position? What are those pain points and problems they're trying to solve for? And how can I bring my unique value to solving those problems? But beyond that, it really is about asking questions. So when you think about getting to know somebody, whether it's a new friend or a new colleague or a new, going on a date, again, to use that analogy, the way we make sense of each other and we get to know each other is through asking questions. And so if we show up to an interview as the interviewee, just waiting to be asked questions, okay, what's the next question? Let me answer it. And then I'm going to sit back and wait for that next question. We're doing ourselves a disservice and we're not driving towards more of that conversation feel. And so I encourage folks to think about it in three ways. You want to have three buckets of questions. So one is a bucket of questions that are uniquely prepared for this specific interview. So you've done your due diligence, you've researched the company, you've researched the role and the person you're talking to, and you're really crafting questions that are specific to this role, this company at this time. You also want to make sure that you have some questions that are go-to questions that you ask maybe of every interview. And these are often derived from your values and what's really important to you. So if, for example, I'm a big extrovert, it's really important to me to foster connection with my colleagues. I might ask questions around how regularly are their team building sessions prioritized? How regularly are there non-project based syncs between team members? What's on the horizon for bringing people together for in-person collaboration if that's important to you and it's a remote role. Making sure you have those questions that you would ask of any company based on your values and your needs. And then the third one's not so much a bucket of questions, it's more a tactic that you can apply to flip the question that you were just asked back on the interviewer. I find this to be so powerful in making it feel like a conversation and also on getting really rich information. So if you think from the interviewer's perspective, they're asking questions that matter to the company, that matter to them in this role. So if they ask you, tell me about a time that you resolved a conflict or you had to navigate a conflict with a team member on a project, I might give my answer and then ask them, I would love to hear about a time you resolved a conflict on your current team. Have you experienced that at Arize? And what support did you receive from your manager or from your HR business partner, let's say? So flipping the question back on the interviewer, because that's also too, again, going back to that idea of how we naturally get to know each other. Joel, if I asked you what your favorite color is, you'd probably reciprocate and be like, yeah, what's your favorite color, Lacey? That's just how conversation flows.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I love that idea. It gets that momentum going back and forth with each other. So that's awesome. That's great.
Exactly.
I'd love to move to another idea that makes some of us anxious and other people really excited, but it's this idea of negotiation. Can you tell us a little bit more about negotiation?
Absolutely. So, negotiations, it's funny that you say that. That makes some people a little bit more anxious and others more excited. I will say that I have like fully transitioned to like being excited about negotiations, but
Yeah.
that's because I think I've been able to demystify it in a lot of ways. Initially, actually, I'll tell a little bit of an anecdote and a story. So I mentioned that I've had a variety of career experiences in my past, one of which my first job out of college was I was living in Serbia, Belgrade, Serbia, and I was recruiting high school exchange students across the Balkans to come to the U.S. on State Department funded programs to spend a year in a U.S. high school. And it was only a 4-month contract. So my first job out of college, it's just a contract-based role. And I was so excited to get it. I was earning, I don't know, I think like $35,000 or something in truncated for 4 months. And it was just like this huge opportunity. And while I was on this in this role, I saw a job posting for the headquarters of this nonprofit organization in DC was hiring a permanent position to program manage part of this program. And I really wanted it and I applied for it and I went through the interview process
And then they gave me an offer. And I initially got the offer in email, which I will say is somewhat uncommon. Typically, I think offers do come verbally over the phone. It's followed up with an email. But because of the time zone difference, I got it as an email. And I was at work when this happened. And I'm ecstatic. I'm jumping up and down in the office. I got the offer. And I'll never forget this. My boss this time, this wonderful woman, Sarah, she pulled me into the office with her. She closed the door and she said, I'm so glad that you're excited about this offer. And I'm going to get up on a soapbox and I'm going to tell you, you have to negotiate for more than whatever it is they offered you. She said, I don't even know what it is that they put in that letter that they sent you. But if you don't negotiate now, it's going to set you up for such a loss in earning potential for the rest of your career. She said, they're expecting you to negotiate. You have unique field experience that no other candidate is going to bring to the table in DC. You need to make this a priority to negotiate. And so I did, and I was successful in it. And it really did set that tone. And some of the things that I've learned over time, because I have negotiated every job offer I've ever gotten since then, thank you, Sarah, is that I think part of what feels intimidating about it is it feels like we shouldn't ask for more. Like they're already giving us this, like there's something wrong in wanting for more. And so I'll normalize, companies expect you to negotiate. They have set aside additional budget to make sure that they're able to secure your talent. Because if they've gotten to the point where they've done the due diligence to write the job description, to post it, to screen initial applicants, to invite folks to interviews, to narrow down that pool, there is so much time and money that has been invested on their part. If they've decided you're the person we're making an offer to, they want you. They've already said that. So instead of seeing it as I'm still across the table from them, hoping that they're going to want me, hoping that I'm good enough, let me see myself as they've now invited me to sit next to them at this table. We're on the same side, and all we're doing is fine tuning to make sure my needs are met. So I'm set up for success on that first day with them. I'm not have lingering questions of could I have gotten more? Could this have gone any differently? Is there another company that could want me more or pay me more? They really want to make sure that you're set up for success from day one. So just normalizing that they expect you to negotiate, and it's important because otherwise you for sure are leaving money on the table.
Yeah, definitely. So what happens in kind of the inverse situation when an employer asks you, like, what are your salary expectations? That can, again, that puts you in the hot seat. What happens then?
Yes. Oh, Joel, I'm so glad that you're flagging this because it's such an important piece of the negotiation process, right? What I was just describing is once the offer is in hand, so often in an initial screen, when they're just trying to see, is this going to have potential to be a good fit? A recruiter or somebody else will ask you, what are your salary expectations? I will say here that in most states, it's illegal at this point to be asked for your salary history. So you cannot be asked to disclose what you're currently making, but it is pretty common to be asked, what are your salary expectations? I would strongly advise not to be the first one to set a number because you have no idea what their band is. Unless they're in a state that requires job descriptions to include that salary range on the job description, you're in the dark. You have less information than they have. And so I encourage you to politely but firmly say, I would rather not discuss that at this stage of the process. And you want to acknowledge whatever their fear might be. So often why they're asking this is they want to make sure that they're not going to, again, invest time and money into this process and get to the end and it's not a good fit. So you want to say, I'm confident that if we decide that this is a mutually good fit, we will be able to come to a compensation package that works for both parties, for both of us. So make sure you acknowledge that piece. And then you can always pivot it back to them. And it would be super helpful to understand what is the salary band you have budgeted for this position. Getting that information up front, having them set that bar helps you to understand going forward what it is you could anticipate from a negotiation perspective. I will say you don't want to limit yourself to thinking that band is the end all be all. Oftentimes there's other parts and components of a compensation package that could also be negotiated, whether that is equity options or flexible working arrangements or things like that. The salary piece is just one piece of it. And I will say, going into any conversation, again, going back to like self-awareness, it is important to know for yourself, I would say 3 numbers. You want to know, what is my like end all be all. This is the baseline number I need to hit to be comfortable in my lifestyle. So know what is that like deal breaker line. Know what's the sweet spot of like, actually, this is really what I'm targeting though. This is where I'd be comfortable. And then I encourage you to have that stretch number goal in mind, right? Have that number that almost makes you a little bit uncomfortable to ask for. Have all three of those numbers written somewhere as a reference point. So when you're getting information from them, you know how to evaluate it in advance. You're not caught on the fly trying to make sense of that.
Lacey, it's been awesome to chat with you today. I'd love to give you just a couple minutes to wrap up. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Joel. It's been so fun chatting with you. And I'm so thrilled to be sharing this perspective and this background and information I've collected over the past few years with the Arize community. A few things that I would love to just reemphasize and have as key takeaways. Again, know yourself, have that self-awareness and self-confidence, make sense of your story to make sure that you are confident that this is the right fitting role for me, not in spite of my background, but because of my background. And I also am confident that this is a good mutual fit because I've treated the interview as a conversation, not an interrogation. I'm asking those questions. I'm getting the information I need to make a good decision for me about whether this is the right opportunity to be pursuing. And then something that I didn't actually mention previously, but I do want to leave folks with, it's one of my mantras just in life, is any of the things we're talking about can be somewhat anxiety inducing. We get hard on ourselves. We feel like we need to impress people and that's what's going to get us what we want. But by and large, the thing that actually creates and drives forward success is connection. And so one of my mantras is connect, not impress. So even going into this chat that we're having right now, Joel, I was getting a little in my head earlier today, feeling like I hope I have something of value to impart on this community and reminding myself that my goal today was to connect with you, to connect with the Arize community and not necessarily to walk away feeling like I impressed people.
Well, we've loved having you here. You do bring a lot of value to folks, watching today, and even for myself. So thank you for spending your time with us. And yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.